Read your thoughts. From the future.
The movies of 1985.
Hello, and welcome to week 23 of the year 1985. That's Tuesday the 4th of June to Monday the 10th of June. My name is Jason Hutchins and I am trapped in the year 1985. That would be 40 years ago for you people in 2025. Now what I do, and what I'd like you to join me on, this little adventure, is every week I spin a bingo machine, select a number, and thereby choose a movie to watch, which I rent from a video store on VHS. So without further ado, let me spin that bingo machine right now. And the ball is out. It is number 36. 36. Now let me look that up. Number 36 is a movie called Clue. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with this one, a comedy about the board game Clue, or as we would call it in Australia, Cluedo. And what I'll do right now is I'll go to a local video store. Let me see, which one shall I do this week? I think I'll go to Video Force in Bayswater because the guys there have a really good comedy section. So while I'm doing that, I'll just switch on the telly and you can watch an ad.
Sail, 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 sail.
Print, 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 print.
Swim, 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 swim.
Skate, 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 skate.
Talk, 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 talk.
Shoot, 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 shoot.
Ski, 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 ski.
Twang, 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 twang.
Walk, walk, walk. Walk, walk.
Go, 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 go.
Go, gallop, run, shuffle.
Jump, giggle, cycle, hit.
Sway, wriggle, paddle, sit.
Hop, tickle, handle it.
Stretch, 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 stretch.
Sit, 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 sit.
Trot, 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 trot.
Splash, 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 splash.
Hit, 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 hit.
Bounce, 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 bounce.
Bounce, bounce, bounce.
Play, 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 play.
Okay, I'm back.
Be in it.
Just pop this in.
Today, little more of your life. Be in it, yeah.
So this is a movie I've seen many times. In fact, I've hosted movie nights to watch this movie, and it's since become a favourite of my daughter as well. But let's have a look at the video cassette that I bought back. So the cover is quite dark. There's big yellow title, Clue, but then it's like a spotlight shining on these characters that are holding all the different weapons from the board game Cluedo. The title Clue is underlined with a red dripping slash that looks like blood. And these silhouetted characters look like they're caught in a spotlight. At the bottom of the front cover, there's a photograph of each of the main actors representing all the characters in the board game, along with the butler Wadsworth. Mr. Body's not on the cover, and the maid as well. I don't remember her name. And it says at the bottom, 7 suspects, 6 weapons, 5 bodies, and 3 endings. Now, famously, this movie did feature 3 different endings, but each, if you went to the cinema to see it, you'd only get one of those 3 endings. So it encouraged people to go and see it at the cinema multiple times to collect them all. But of course, on video cassette, you get all 3 endings, and that was one of the features of the VHS. Now, flipping over the back, it says running time 92 minutes. There's a diagram of this Gothic mansion with the characters in the windows. And it says, Cluedo isn't just a board game anymore. The suspicious characters and sinister rooms made famous by the board game have come to life. Clue is a comedy that also entertains as a murder mystery in the classic tradition of delicious and stylish whodunits. The butler, the maid, and the cook, plus a few others, are new characters invented for the film. Now each is both a suspect and a potential victim. For mysterious reasons, a bizarre group of people are summoned to a luxurious dinner party in an elegant but long deserted mansion. In the course of the evening, their darkest secrets are revealed, and the gathering becomes dangerous for all, and for some fatal as it escalates from nervous apprehension to frantic terror. Now it says down the bottom, featuring all 3 surprise endings, and it lists the cast: Eileen Brennan, Tim Curry, Madeline Kahn, Christopher Lloyd, Michael McKean, Martin Mull, Leslie Ann Warren. Michael McKean, of course, was in Spinal Tap that was released just the previous year. Christopher Lloyd was actually filming Back to the Future while filming this movie as well. So quite an interesting time capsule. Anyway, without further ado, let's press play on tape and watch Clue.
Every person in this room has the perfect motive
Stand back!
for murder.
What do you mean? Murder.
But only one of these suspects is the murderer. Is it the timid Mr. Green
Why are you screaming? Because I'm frightened of what? Screaming!
or the militant Colonel Mustard?
If I was the killer, I would kill you next.
Huh?
I said if. If.
Mrs. White, who helped her husband on his way?
Well, it's a matter of life after death. Now that he's dead, I have a life.
Miss Scarlet, who's helped many men along the way?
Practice makes perfect. Huh.
Professor Plum, who's looking for a way?
I'm looking.
Mrs. Peacock,
I have absolutely no idea what we're doing here, but I am determined to enjoy myself.
or did the butler do it?
No.
Paramount Pictures invites you to an evening of mystery,
Let us in!
murder,
This is getting quite serious.
and madness. In the movie that makes a scene of the crime,
So who did it?
Clue. It's not just a game anymore.
Well, like I said, I've seen this movie so many times. It is a stone cold classic, is Clue. I could watch it again and again. Now, like I said in the introduction, I have hosted a fancy dress Clue movie night not too long ago. It was maybe 2 years ago, and we have watched this movie many times with the family. It is a really well constructed comedy. It's not sort of joke after joke. It's just very well observed, and it gets down to business very quickly. And like I always do, let me go through the first 10 minutes or so just to give you an idea of how quickly it sets things up. So we fade in to dark clouds, and we have credits over these dark, stormy clouds for the first 2 minutes. Then we see a car driving along at night. As the credits continue, and we see that it's Wadsworth the butler driving the car. That's Tim Curry. In a bowler hat in the car, he opens a gate and drives through towards a large, gloomy-looking house on a hill, a big mansion. And he hops out, and there's 2 guard dogs that bark at him on long chains. But he's come prepared. He's got some sausages or bones in a paper bag, and he throws them at the dogs and then shortens their leads so that they won't be able to accost anyone else who's arriving on the doorstep. Of course, as he finishes doing that, he takes a step towards the house and steps in a bit of doggy doo-doo, as it were. And he scrapes it off his shoe as he enters the front door of the mansion, and then there's a little title overlaid, New England 1954. He speaks to Yvette the maid, who's dancing to some rock and roll on the stereo, dressed as a French maid, just to make sure that everything's ready. She sniffs in the air, so this is one of their little gags in the movie, and then checks the bottom of her shoes, because obviously the smell of the doggy doo-doo has made its way into the house. Anyway, next he goes and checks on the cook. She's sharpening a big knife, looking very threatening with that. That will come back into play later on, of course. Then the front bell rings, so he goes in again. There's a man in a hat silhouetted on the wall, and of course it's Colonel Mustard. Colonel Mustard, played by Martin Mull. Wadsworth explains to him that we're all going to use aliases tonight. Don't use your real name. Come on inside, come into the lounge. Now, of course, Colonel Mustard checks his shoes as well because he thinks he's stepped in the doggy doo-doo, and Yvette the maid is pouring champagne in the lounge. But then the bell rings again. This time it's Mrs. White, dressed all in black, but of course her black coat has a white lining, so she gets the name. So that's Mrs. White is played by Madeline Kahn, the great Madeline Kahn that you might remember from Blazing Saddles, or I think she's also in Young Frankenstein. She's in What's Up, Doc? I talked about What's Up, Doc when we were talking about car chases last year when we watched movies like Ronin, wasn't it, in the movies of 1999. She's also in a movie called Paper Moon, directed by Peter Bogdanovich, who's the director of Mask, which we looked at earlier this year. Now, I've never seen Paper Moon. I'm putting it down on my list. So that ticks a few boxes. But anyway, Madeline Kahn, Mrs. White, arrives on the doorstep. She sniffs around as Wadsworth helps her with a coat, and she checks the bottom of her shoes before being escorted to the lounge. There's a little visual gag as they open the door to the lounge, and it pushes Colonel Mustard to one side and he becomes trapped behind the door. And then we cut to a car that's broken down out in the middle of the woods, and it's Miss Scarlet, played by Leslie Ann Warren. Leslie Ann Warren, or who I prefer to call her Susan Sarandon, because every time I see this movie, I confuse the two actors. They are very similar, aren't they? So anyway, she's broken down, and who should turn up to give her a ride but it's Professor Plum, played by Christopher Lloyd. So they both ride back to the house. Meanwhile, at the house, Mrs. Peacock, that's Eileen Brennan. Now, Eileen Brennan was in a very similar movie called Murder by Death, another comedy whodunit, which came out in 1976. Now, I've not seen that one either, so I'm writing Murder by Death down along with Paper Moon. I'm having my movie watching work cut out for me, aren't I? So anyway, Mrs. Peacock gets let in. Then there's a bell at the door, so that's Mr. Green, Michael McKean from Spinal Tap and Better Call Saul, Saul's brother. So there's another gag with Michael McKean because the dogs start barking at him, and Wadsworth yells out, "Sit!" to the dogs, and Mr. Green immediately sits on a bench near the front door. So there's all those sort of subtle visual gags that are quite funny. I quite like this movie. Anyway, finally, Professor Plum and Miss Scarlet arrive and the party's complete. Now, this all happens in the first 10 minutes of the movie, so that includes 2 minutes of credits. So in 8 minutes, they've established who all the characters are. They've got them all into the house, all into the lounge, actually, drinking champagne. And you see all their little foibles. You sort of learn a bit about what kind of people these characters are. It's very, very efficient in that respect. And I think there's a few movies from 1985 and the 80s in general that sort of have a really well-engineered feel to them. Movies like Back to the Future and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I've mentioned this before. And this is one of them. It just feels really well put together. Anyway, at the 10-minute mark, the cook bangs a gong. Mr. Green spills his champagne all over Mrs. Peacock, because it makes him jump. And they proceed to have dinner. Mr. Body, their host, arrives at 16 minutes in. Now, Mr. Body is played by someone called Lee Ving, which is a stage name for this guy who was a frontrunner of a punk band in Los Angeles, I believe. He was in a couple of movies. I'm not sure what else he was in, but the punk band was called Fear. But the people who made Clue chose him because they thought it was funny that he would be playing Mr. Body, and Mr. Body is leaving. So they thought that was funny. So I'm not sure whether people picked up on that. So anyway, so we're now 16 minutes in. That's with Mr. Body arriving at the dinner party. But by the 24-minute mark, we've been shown all the murder weapons. Mr. Body has turned off the light. There's a gunshot. They turn the lights back on and Mr. Body is dead. So at the 24-minute mark, we've got the dead body and the game is afoot. So like I said, it's a funny movie. There's a lot of gags. There's 3 different endings. It's a family favourite. We really enjoyed it. What was interesting about Susan Sarandon, or should I say Leslie Ann Warren, is she was a last-minute substitution for Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher was supposed to play Miss Scarlet, but she ended up in rehab at the time. Can you imagine what this movie would have been like with Carrie Fisher playing Mrs. Scarlet? And I think there was someone else who was meant to be... Yeah, so Rowan Atkinson was originally supposed to be playing Wadsworth the butler. So that would have been interesting with Carrie Fisher and Rowan Atkinson. But they ended up not choosing him because he wasn't well known enough in America, I think. Anyway, that's quite interesting. And also Christopher Lloyd was in 2 movies this year which were set in the 50s. So Back to the Future and this movie as well. One was set in Hill House, the other one with Hill Valley. Both movies culminated in a thunderstorm during the climactic events of the movie. Anyway, I am giving Clue 4.5 stars out of 5. It's a favourite. It's a Mintox. Watch it on SBS In Demand if you're in Australia. If you've never seen it, please make sure to watch it. It's hilarious. But now...
I'm driving to love and I'm just singing my song. I'm in a news-free zone.
Well, welcome to the News-Free Zone, everybody. It's that time of the podcast where we look back at the news from 1985 so we don't have to watch the dumpster fire of the year 2025. So in this week in 1985, the TV show Hey Hey It's Saturday, which all of our Australian listeners will fondly remember, or maybe not so fondly, it shifted to its 6:30 p.m. time slot, which it would have on Saturday night for many, many years to come. So just before this, it was called Hey Hey It's Saturday Night. It was on at 9:30 p.m. or something like that. It had shifted there from an early Saturday morning show, so they were sort of fiddling around with the format, but it became this big variety show that went for 2.5 hours or something every Saturday night at 6:30 p.m. all across Australia, and it ran for about 30 years or something like that, didn't it? So this week in 1985 also saw the theatrical release of The Goonies, which we haven't talked about yet in the movies of 1985, but it was really Gen X's sort of genre-defining kid adventure movie, wasn't it? And it opened this week at number 2. So the number 1 movie was Rambo, or Part 2 or whatever, First Blood. So that was the big movie, but The Goonies came in at second, and that was Steven Spielberg produced treasure hunt that really appealed to families and younger kids, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. Haven't seen it for yonks. So yeah, I don't have very much news for this week. The other thing that stuck out at me is that the US Supreme Court struck down Alabama's moment of silence, which was a law that ruled that authorizing meditation in schools violated the First Amendment. Now, what had happened is Alabama, I'm pronouncing it the Australian way, come on. They had tried to sneak prayer back into schools, into public schools, through the back door by calling it meditation, like a non-religious act, I suppose, of just having a bit of silent contemplation. But the Supreme Court saw right through that and they struck it down. So it's interesting that there's this constant battle between the states and the Supreme Court, with the states trying to go their own way, isn't there, in the United States? Makes for quite an interesting experiment in democracy, but let's not go there. It's a little bit too close to 2025, isn't it? So the other thing I like to do is I like to read me a bit of Usenet. Now, if you go to olduse.net in your web browser, you can read social media from 1985. Can you believe it? We had the internet in 1985, and we even had social media, and it was called Usenet. And each week I read the Usenet from 40 years ago. And I think on net.ai, someone called Kirk Kelly was talking about McDonnell Douglas announcing a breakthrough in natural language processing. Now, this was on the back cover of Business Week this week in 1985. Now, he said that he sort of copied down some of the text on the back cover, saying that McDonnell Douglas have emulated the two halves of the human brain with two-level software. One level has a dictionary of facts, and then there's another level to interpret them, and the resulting natural language processor can understand everyday conversational English. Now, these days, that sort of thing wouldn't be very surprising. In 1985, of course, it was all smoke and mirrors, and this was a bit of a nothing burger, but it was it's sort of interesting to look back on it in the light of how far AI has come. People have been trying to achieve language using computers for forever, ever since we've had computers. So that's quite cool. I'm not going to say it's quite interesting because I'm repeating that all the time. Over on net.cooks, a user called David Sherfall posted the results of a survey that he had conducted about microwave ovens. Now, in 1985 on the Usenet, this would happen all the time. What would happen is someone would post a message saying, I want to conduct a survey about microwave ovens. Have you got one? What do you think of it? How much did it cost? What are the must-have features and all that sort of stuff? And what people would do is they would email back the person directly, because people didn't like a lot of messages being posted to Usenet because it would take forever to download. So they just wanted to get summaries. So everyone would email their answers to the one guy, who would then make a little research project, collate the results, write a bit of a report, and then post the report back to Usenet with lots of quotations and stuff. And that's something that we've lost, isn't it? And I find that's really cool to get a summary rather than wading through hundreds of replies. So what I learned by reading his report is all the microwaves back in 1985 had built-in temperature probes, which nobody really used, but obviously the manufacturers thought that people would want to use them, because the problem with the microwaves, of course, is back in 1985, it was very rare for a microwave to have a rotating carousel. So you'd put your food in and it would be very cold in certain spots. And they actually recommend that you open the door and rotate the dish yourself, and sort of built an analogy between doing that and stirring it with a spoon if you were going to cook your food on the stovetop. So that's how people were using their microwaves, which is fascinating, really. So I'm not going to say quite interesting. The microwaves back then were luxury items. Not many people had them. They were quite expensive. And if you look at the photographs of some of them, they look like they're straight out of Andor. They look like Star Wars Rebel base kind of things. So he had a quotation in his report from one of the guys who has a microwave and absolutely loves it. And he says that he's a single guy living in an apartment, and he's always on the go, so he doesn't have much time to prepare his evening meal. So he comes home at 5:30, takes a pork chop out of the freezer, puts it in the microwave on a 10-minute defrost cycle. Halfway through the defrost cycle, he throws in a potato and a dish of frozen veggies. And then after the pork chop is defrosted, he puts it on a 3-minute browning cycle, flips it over, 3 minutes on the other side, and there's his dinner. Home at 5:30, eating dinner by 6 o'clock. What a champ. so this is like peak 1985. So, yeah, let me just say, I'm not cooking my pork chop in a microwave. That's disgusting. That stuff is, throw it in a pan. Come on, man. Anyway, I don't have any Peeps Diary this week. I'm not sure how that went down, the news from 1665, but we might revisit that in another episode. But right now, until next week, please don't forget to rewind.